What you're about to see doesn't look like failure at first glance. That's the trap. In 2026, parts of Germany have city center streets that are technically open, but functionally dead. The storefronts are lit, the escalators still run, the pavements are clean, and yet the street has no heartbeat. And once people learn which blocks to avoid, the center breaks into islands. Tonight, we're going city by city through Germany's zombie streets. 10 places you won't believe are real. Starting with number 10, Magdeburg, the planned revival. You can tell a center is under stress when it starts needing a written strategy just to stay coherent. A healthy street does not require constant explanation. It keeps businesses rotating in and out, without the whole area losing confidence. Once vacancy becomes something officials track, argue over, and design around, the street has already changed. In Magdeburg, that change shows up as a quiet you can feel. Parts of the pedestrian core still do the basics: commuters crossing, quick purchases, a few cafes that hold their regulars. Then you hit a stretch where the rhythm breaks. A unit sits empty long enough that "coming soon" stops appearing. A larger shell stays dark, and nearby shops adjust by tightening opening hours and reducing stock to cut risk. The center is treated less like a natural marketplace and more like a program. Events to pull footfall, temporary uses to fill gaps, small incentives to lower the risk of opening, and a push for mixed use so the center is not dependent on shopping alone. Those moves can help, but they also expose the problem. When the street needs programming to feel alive, normal life has become optional. Another tell is how people talk. Instead of saying, "Let's meet on the main street," they choose a specific shop or a specific corner, as if the center has stopped being an obvious default. Visitors move through efficiently. Locals learn which blocks to skip. That kind of micro-avoidance is hard to measure, but it is often the first stage of decline. The most grounded explanation is not a single dramatic cause. It is a stack: online shopping, less discretionary spending, too much retail space built for an earlier era, and property decisions that keep big units empty longer than smaller ones. Add time, and the street starts to feel like it is waiting for permission to recover. And once you understand the planned revival version, you are ready for a darker one, where the missing piece is not a small shop but a gravity well. Number 9. Halle, the department store shadow. The moment a large anchor disappears, a street can lose its pull even if plenty of people still live nearby. Small closures are painful but survivable. An anchor closure changes the route map in people's heads. They stop wandering into town and start going only when they must. In Halle, the center still has movement, but it is movement with purpose. People cut through to transit, to a specific chain, to a specific errand. Browsing becomes rarer, and browsing is what keeps the middle layer alive. The bookshop that relies on passing curiosity, the clothing store that needs trying on, the cafe that survives on unplanned stops. When the anchor goes, that middle layer takes the hit first. You can see the shadow effect around the empty shell. Nearby units become harder to let because tenants know the street no longer guarantees volume. Landlords hesitate to drop rents quickly enough because a lower rent feels like a permanent admission. The result is a stalemate that looks like waiting for the right tenant, while months become years. Locals start treating the building like weather. Everyone has heard a rumor, nobody has seen the change. Then the mix shifts. More services move in because they do not require the same footfall. Parcel points, phone repair, nail studios, betting shops, quick food. These uses can keep a street functioning, but they also signal a downgrade. The center becomes practical rather than attractive. If you are looking for a place to spend an afternoon, you stop choosing it. The uncomfortable part is perception. When other parts of the city are fine, a big visible void tells a story of decline. Residents begin recommending other places, and that drains the center further without one clear culprit. Reuse is possible, but it is hard. Big boxes are expensive to subdivide, expensive to convert, and slow to approve. Until that happens, the street lives with a wound that does not heal. And if you think an empty anchor is eerie, wait until the building stays open while the life leaks out from the inside. Number 8. Chemnitz, the quiet mall effect. A failing mall creates a different kind of dead zone because the building keeps pretending. The lights stay on, the escalators run, and the signage still promises choice. But choice is not what you feel. You feel gaps, long walks past shutters, and the sense that the place is operating on leftovers. In Chemnitz, you notice it in the pacing. The center can still offer a few strong destinations, yet the connective spaces thin out. A unit closes and stays closed long enough that people stop slowing down to look. The remaining shops become islands rather than a chain. Once that happens, the building turns into a corridor. Customers go straight to the one store they trust, then often leave. This corridor effect quietly kills the small purchases that keep an ecosystem healthy. The extra stop you made because the place felt pleasant. When people stop looping, the weaker tenants lose oxygen first, and each closure makes the loop less worth doing. The mall does not collapse, it thins. On paper, the retail space still exists, so the situation is easy to minimize. But lived experience is not square meters, it is energy. If a space feels tired, people treat it as a last resort. Chemnitz also shows the split between busy nodes and dead stretches only minutes apart, which lets the decline deepen without one dramatic moment. One small detail makes the decline stick. The empty units stay visually empty. Some owners block them off with shutters instead of active window displays, so the corridor feels longer. Short leases become common, which means shops change frequently and customers stop forming habits. And when maintenance slips, a tired floor or broken signage tells people the place is no longer cared for. The drivers are mundane. Online competition, reduced spending, too much legacy retail space, and slow reuse of larger units. The zombie feeling is simply what those forces look like when they are not solved. Now zoom out, because some cities don't just notice the holes, they start drawing maps around them. If you've walked streets like this, I'd really value your first-hand view. Comment the city and the moment you noticed it changing, and subscribe to our channel. Number 7. Krefeld, the vacancy map city. When a city starts counting empty units, it is admitting that the problem is bigger than a few unlucky shops. Vacancy becomes a policy topic, not just a market outcome. That shift can be sensible, but it also signals that the center needs help to behave like a center. In Krefeld, the discussion is practical and sometimes openly blunt. Which streets are still pulling people? Which blocks have become weak links? Where is the vacancy clustering, and why? Mapping matters because it reveals patterns that casual walkers miss. A dead stretch between two busy nodes, a side street that lost its anchor, a row of larger units that cannot find tenants at the old rent levels. The tension usually sits with property. In a strong market, landlords can wait. In a weak market, waiting becomes part of the damage. An empty unit on a main street tells passers-by that the street is declining, even if the unit is empty, simply because rent expectations have not caught up to reality. That gap between asking and possible can keep shutters down for years, so the center begins to accept substitutes. Pop-up shops, cultural projects, community uses, small studios, and short-term concepts can put light behind the glass. That helps perception and safety, but it can also create a new fragility. If much of the street relies on temporary uses, the center starts to feel like it is being staged rather than rebuilt. You also see a shift in what success means. Instead of a thriving shopping street, the goal becomes a street people will still walk. Seating, lighting, events, and cleaner public space become as important as retail. That is a logical adaptation, yet it also confirms the diagnosis. The center is no longer held together by shopping alone. The most grounded view is that none of this is mysterious. It is the consequence of changing habits meeting legacy property. The question is whether the center can change fast enough to stay relevant. Here's where it turns from observation to intervention, when the city steps in because the market won't. Number 6. Wuppertal, when the city helps pay the rent. A street reaches a new phase when opening a door becomes too risky for ordinary businesses. If footfall is uncertain and rent is sticky, many people who could run a good shop simply do not try. They do not want to be the next empty unit. At that point, a city's role can shift from regulator to matchmaker. In Wuppertal, you can see attempts to lower the entry cost for new ideas in the center. The logic is straightforward. If the first months are the danger zone, reduce that danger so concepts can survive long enough to be discovered. It can be a small shop, a workshop, a studio, a cafe, or a service that brings regular visits. The aim is not only commerce, it is repetition. A center feels alive when people have reasons to return. These programs can make a difference quickly. A street with lighted windows feels safer. Empty units stop shouting decline. Visitors spend a little longer. The center buys time, but time is not the same as recovery, and And the hardest question arrives quietly. What happens when the support ends? Some projects build a customer base and stay. Others prove that the problem was not the entrepreneur. It was the street's reduced capacity to generate demand. When that happens, the unit goes dark again, and the effort looks like a loop of temporary life. Wuppertal also highlights how competition has changed. The center is not only competing with online shopping, it is competing with easier routines, edge-of-town retail parks, home delivery, and social life that happens elsewhere. To win, a center has to offer something that cannot be delivered in a box. That usually means experience, convenience, or community, and those take time to rebuild. So the zombie feeling here is not abandonment, it is dependency. The street needs constant help to keep its doors open. That can be a bridge to something better, or it can become the new normal. But support can't fix one brutal truth. Once confidence breaks, even a small closure lands like a siren. Number 5. Gelsenkirchen, the closure that feels like a warning. Some centers fail by thinning slowly, then suddenly feel dead, even if plenty of people still pass through. The change is less about headcounts and more about confidence. Once shoppers stop trusting the center to deliver what they need, every trip becomes more selective, and selective trips do not support broad streets. In Gelsenkirchen, that confidence problem can be triggered by ordinary retail news. Another branch closing, another unit going vacant, another sign taken down. In a healthier center, you shrug and assume something else will replace it. Here, the closure reads like a verdict. People start asking, what is left? And that question alone shifts behavior. You can watch the street adapt in small ways. Opening hours compress. Businesses focus on essentials and avoid niche stock. Streets that once had a mix begin to lean toward low-risk categories: quick food, services, discount goods, betting, mobile phone contracts. The point is what their dominance signals. The street is being kept functional, not aspirational. The damage compounds because chains are symbolic. When a familiar brand leaves, outsiders assume demand has collapsed. Landlords become cautious. New tenants negotiate harder. Existing tenants worry about footfall. The center begins to feel like it is always one step away from another retreat. It is tempting to blame one cause, but it is usually a stack. Some households have less money. Some centers were built for more shoppers than they now get. Online retail removed the easy purchases. Property ownership can be fragmented, making coordinated redevelopment slow. And when there are too many units chasing too little demand, vacancy becomes sticky. What makes this street feel zombie is that the decline does not need drama. It can happen through 100 small decisions: choosing a retail park instead, ordering online instead, meeting friends elsewhere, driving past the center rather than entering it. Each choice is rational. Together, they hollow a place. And in bigger centers, the damage isn't one dead street. It's the empty space between the places that still work. Number 4. Duisburg, a center that cannot agree with itself. A center can look alive in photographs and still feel weak on foot. That happens when activity concentrates into islands. You get a lively square, a functioning transport hub, a mall that still pulls, and then, between them, streets that feel like they are missing purpose. The gaps matter because they decide whether people wander or retreat. In Duisburg, the center feels like a negotiation between these islands. Some routes are reliable, others feel tired. A stretch with several empty fronts changes the way people walk. They speed up, stop browsing, and treat the area as something to cross rather than inhabit. That is the psychology behind a zombie street. This is also where the debate becomes sharper. Some people want the center to return to retail dominance. Others argue that is unrealistic and that the center should pivot toward living, services, and leisure. It shapes investment. If you keep waiting for the old model, big shells stay empty. If you pivot too slowly, you lose footfall before new uses arrive. Another pressure is comfort and safety. A center with too many closed units can feel less watched. Add construction works, poor lighting, or street-level solicitation, and ordinary visitors choose alternatives. That choice can be made without any incident. It is simply avoidance. Independent businesses feel this first. Chains can absorb losses. A small owner lives and dies by the street's daily mood. When footfall drops, they cut staff hours, reduce stock, and eventually close. Each closure removes uniqueness, making the center less worth visiting, and the cycle tightens. Duisburg shows how decline can coexist with normality. The city is not empty. The center is not uniformly dead, but the weak links are enough to change behavior. and behavior changes outcomes faster than policy can. From here, the story turns more sensitive. In some cities, the street does not feel hollow because people are absent. It feels hollow because the public space is dominated by distress, and ordinary life pulls back. Now the story shifts because some streets aren't hollow from vacancy. They're hollow because ordinary life won't stay. Number 3. Hamburg, the station district that changes the rules. A street can be crowded and still feel dead to ordinary life when the dominant activity is not shopping, work, or leisure, but constant crisis management. People do not necessarily stay away because they are frightened of a single event. They stay away because the atmosphere feels unpredictable, exhausting, or unpleasant. In Hamburg, that mood concentrates where many flows collide. Commuters, visitors, nightlife, vulnerable people, police, and outreach services all using the same small grid of streets. The result can be a public space that looks busy yet feels thin. You see people moving fast, eyes forward, minimizing contact. Businesses adapt by reducing their exposure. Fewer outdoor seats, earlier closing, tighter rules, more security. This is the point where sloppy language can do harm. The zombie street label should not turn people into monsters. The more accurate description is that visible hardship, when concentrated, changes how everyone else uses the space. That shift can happen even if the rest of the city is thriving. There is also the relocation effect. When authorities apply pressure to one hotspot, the problem rarely disappears. It shifts to the next block, the next entrance, the next park edge. That makes residents feel gaslit. Every announcement sounds like success. Every walk home suggests nothing changed. In reality, the system is managing visibility more than resolving causes. Hamburg shows how quickly perception hardens. Once a pocket gets a reputation, it becomes that place. Taxi warnings, tourist advice, local avoidance, and social media clips all reinforce it. Then normal businesses struggle, and the street loses legitimate reasons for ordinary people to linger, which leaves the space even more dominated by the very activity everyone is debating. The uncomfortable truth is that this is not only a policing question or only a welfare question. It is capacity, enough support services, enough housing stability, enough treatment access, and enough coordination that the street is not asked to carry the entire burden in public. And nothing hits harder than watching that tension sit right next to wealth, like two cities sharing the same pavement. Number 2. Frankfurt am Main, the split-screen city. The most jarring urban scenes are the ones that exist in full view of wealth. You can stand among glass towers and clean pavements, then walk a short distance into streets where the ground-level reality feels like a different city. That contrast fuels viral clips and weak explanations. In Frankfurt am Main, the station district has carried a reputation for years. It is not a single street and not the whole city. It is a pocket where enforcement, outreach, addiction, mental health strain, nightlife, and commuter traffic collide. The result is a place many people pass through, but fewer people choose to stay in. That choice reshapes the economics. Cafes hesitate to invest, retail becomes cautious, and the zone becomes more dominated by the activity people want to avoid. This is how a zombie street can form without widespread vacancy. Avoidance creates its own hollowing. When ordinary footfall pulls back, the remaining street life becomes more visible and more intense, which pushes more people away. The boundary hardens. Locals start giving routing advice. Visitors learn which exits to take. The street becomes a story, but it is important to stay grounded. The area can look different depending on hour and block. A morning commute can feel tense but functional, while late evening feels harsher. Interventions can reduce harm, even if they do not produce a comfortable street immediately, and heavy crackdowns can create a short-term calm while shifting pressure elsewhere. You also see the knock-on effects. Hotels field complaints, workers change shifts to avoid certain routes, and businesses pay for extra security they cannot afford. The deeper issue is that no single lever fixes it. If the city emphasizes only policing, it risks displacement and distrust. If it emphasizes only services without enough capacity, capacity. It risks burnout and frustration. If it tries to make the scene invisible, it risks pushing people into riskier spaces. The street becomes a symbol because the system underneath is stretched. And last but not least, number 1, Berlin, the hotspot that never stays put. A capital concentrates everything, including problems that smaller cities can spread out. That concentration is why certain squares, station exits, and parks become recurring headlines. It is also why the same argument repeats. Clear the hotspot and it reappears somewhere else. In Berlin, the street-level tension shows up in pockets that feel stuck in a cycle. The wider city can be busy, yet a walk takes you into a zone where ordinary people stop behaving ordinarily. They move faster, watch their pockets, avoid eye contact, and treat the space like something to pass through. Businesses adjust with tighter rules and less openness, which removes the comforts that make a street feel shared. One reason the hotspot cycle persists is displacement. Pressure in one location pushes the scene to another, sometimes only a few minutes away. Residents feel whiplash as hotspots move. It can also create a false choice between compassion and order, when the real constraint is capacity. The city tries mixtures of responses: police presence, outreach, contact points, rules around certain spaces, and coordination between agencies. Some measures improve safety for a while. Others reduce visibility while leaving the underlying distress untouched. When people say the street feels zombie, this is often what they mean: managed but not healed. If you've walked one of these streets, drop the city name in the comments. I want to hear what you saw. If this video opened your eyes, hit like so more people see it. Subscribe for more deep dives like this, because this story isn't over. It's spreading.